Female salespeople talk more and interrupt more, yet still close more deals. We're digging into the data on this episode of Closing Time. Hi, I'm Val Riley, Head of Content Marketing at Insightly. Today I'm joined by Amy Volas. Amy is a strategic advisor, owner of Avenue Talent Partners. She's also a 3-time founder with 2 successful exits. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Hi, Val. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm super jazzed about this topic because obviously I've been a woman in revenue for more than 20 years. And I can say in my experience, men have far outnumbered women in sales positions that I've been exposed to. It sounds like my experience is the norm.
You're not alone. Same. And I actually pulled some data thinking about our conversation. So it's almost 2.7 million people in sales that are employed in the US today. 70.5% of them are men, and 29.5% of salespeople are women. So the odds are not in our favor.
So we dug around here at Insightly. We found a research report from our friends at Gong, and we'll put a link in the video description for it. But it states that men on sales calls tend to listen more and interrupt less. So you would think the guys would be crushing it. Can we dig into that a little bit?
I read the same piece of data from Gong. And so then that got my wheels turning, and I found really interesting data from Harvard Business Review. And they broke down 7 different attributes that equaled success in sales. And so their data said high performing women were more likely to emphasize connecting, shaping solutions, and collaborating, while high performing men relied more on improving and driving outcomes. So when you think about that, so we're more focused on connection and trying to figure out a solution and figuring that out and shaping that, and then really collaborating. And our male counterparts are really focused on improving and driving the outcome. And by the way, all these things are important, but if that's really where we shine, let's fast forward to today's modern buyer. Today's digital savvy, self-sufficient, well-informed buyer, they have a plethora of information before we ever get involved in the buyer journey. And so by the time that we start to materialize those conversations, they want value beyond a demo, beyond what they can see socially, beyond what they can see in a website, a white paper, content, whatever the case may be. And so I think our ability as women to connect, to shape solutions, ultimately people want to be seen, heard, understood, valued, and validated. That's why I think that stat rings true of the performance between the man and the woman is we're craving real connection, not just thinking about the outcome. So the way to get to the outcome, you have to think about the why, the where, the what, the with whom, all of the things to get to the outcome. And the only way to do that is to put our discovery hat on and to truly lean in with our buyer. And that's where that collaboration piece comes into play. So Harvard Business Review's data points to, I think, those factors of it's not showing up and just doing a demo and hoping that something sticks. It's being part of that multi-threaded journey with a variety of buyers, understanding what they stand for, what's important to them, what problems they're trying to solve, what goals they're trying to reach, what is keeping them, I hate this question, but what is keeping them up at night? Don't ask that question. Pro tip, do not ask that question. But, it's one of those things that the magic is below the surface. And I think we are more apt to spend time digging below the surface, putting our listening ears on, not our happy ears, to objection handle, sell, push, etc. And because of that, we realize more success.
Well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir because I love analysis of how that buyer's journey has changed and how the self-directed buyer really is entering at a totally different point now than they were, say, like 5, 10 years ago. So it seems like that change in the buyer's journey might be an advantage for the female salesperson.
Well, and let's think about what we're seeing in the marketplace right now. The market is shifting, and the rhetoric that everyone is talking about is revenue and retention solve all problems. And so when you think about that, most value doesn't come from the initial sale, especially if we're talking about enterprise sales. It comes after the fact. And so when we're putting that collaboration, that connecting the dots, that search for understanding their business and not our quest to make the sale, that's going to help us realize more revenue and retention and growth, right? So I think it's not just the initial sale, that's all well and good. And I think we're seeing that with, sadly, all the layoffs that we're talking about. A lot of those companies that have gone through layoffs that got a bunch of funding, they were running real hot and they were focusing on net new, net new, net new, net new, but they failed to realize after the fact, well, it's one thing to get something, it's a whole other ball of wax to keep it, to grow it, to nurture it, and to sustain it for the long haul. That mindset is the mindset that wins.
Gotcha. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about female sales leaders. I have another link to share about a study about millennials actually preferring female bosses. In fact, we did a data poll here at Insightly, Amy, and we discovered that 80% of our workforce is millennials. So millennials in tech is a huge factor, and they seem to prefer to have female leaders. What do you take from there?
My biggest take is, well, what are we doing about it then? Because if we know that there's a big discrepancy between, so the US, so I rattled off some stats before, but the last US Census data that I got around women in sales as a function was 76.3% of people in sales were men. And then when you slice out the leadership piece, those numbers aren't the same, they're actually smaller. And so you can't create leadership that doesn't exist. And so I want to go back to the basics. When I first started in my career, the term leadership training still existed. And in this day and age, it seems to have dissipated a bit unless you are a very big company. But as it relates to your question, it starts with bringing people in. And so this is a challenge that I give to every founder. If you want more women in sales leadership, you've got to bring them in. So we do a really good job of bringing people into the function from an overall DE&I perspective, not just women. But if you want more people in leadership, whether it's women or anybody else, it's, well, what are you doing to bring them into the profession, support them, enable them, understand them and their nuances, and then bolster them? Because there's a lot of data. McKinsey has a lot of data around this, that as we continue to go up the chain, it becomes exponentially harder to get promoted. And I've seen this in the work that I do as well. Women display differently in interviews than men do. We are not as aggressive. We don't use the same language. The way that we think, and we just talked about this with the different traits, the way that we think about solving problems or approaching business is different. It's not bad, it's different. So the way to approach it is get real clear about the competency of the work that you need to get done and look for that, not the traits that have been ingrained in our brain of a lot of the bro culture stuff of like 100% or go home or we're going to crush it. Women may not necessarily think about that. Also think about what it takes to inspire women into leadership. Some of us are moms. Some of us have other things, especially with the pandemic of what it's taught us. We lost over 5.3 million women in the workforce because they had to go to work in a different way. It was called being a mom full time. And so I think it's just understanding the complexity of, if you want more of us at that table, you have to understand what it takes to get us to that table, to support us along the journey for that table, and to not push us down because we don't look the same or act the same or talk the same at the table as our male counterparts.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly I can relate, to more than 20 years in revenue. It certainly has happened. I like what you're talking about because I've heard it coined as that bottom rung effect, meaning like we don't have females to promote into high sales positions because they didn't get that first leadership position or that first promotion way before, because their value and skills perhaps weren't recognized in the same way that a male colleague's skills were. So they didn't get that first step, and they're always like a rung or two behind.
Then it's compounding effects, right?
Yeah.
So if I didn't get that first one, how on earth can I get the next one and the next one and the next one after that?
Mhm.
And so I think it's about understanding what good looks like with different kinds of people, and it's the biggest takeaway for anybody listening. What is the work that is required to do the job well? And center around that, because competency displays in different ways. So you and I could talk about being successful, and how you cross the finish line, Val, is going to be very different than the way that I do, and we both did it. And that was a really good lesson that I learned early on in my career. We are conditioned to look for the stereotype in sales of that's good leadership. So leading with the carrot and the stick, or some of these old kind of mentalities. And in fact, I think the reason why people like reporting to women is they feel seen, heard, and understood, right? Like that they crave connection. People want to belong to something, especially in the generations that are younger than yours truly. The way that I came up is not the way that people are coming up now. And it's that ability to understand that. And I think that's what it's going to take to get more of us at that table and to stay at that table. Because it's one thing to bring us to the table, it's another thing to pull out the chair and keep us sitting at that table. Because one thing to note is I can't tell you how many times people will tell me, I need to hire a woman for this role. And I say, why? And it's to tick a box. And the problem with that is a woman is smart, right? She's got that seat at that table. She earned that role. If you are just treating her like the obligatory bobblehead doll of a woman, and you treat her as such, and she doesn't truly have a seat, you're not going to keep her. And then what message does that send to the rest of your team? And then you're perpetuating the problem of you can't keep them, which makes it a hell of a lot harder for you to do anything else in the future. Compounding effects.
Gosh, Amy, so much to unpack here. We will definitely link all of the resources we talked about in the show notes, so go take a look there. Amy, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you. This was an important conversation to have. Thank you for having it with me, Val. I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to sign off. Remember, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tick that bell for notifications so you don't miss another episode. We'll see you next time on Closing Time.